Hello children, so today we're going to learn about this concept called integers. Now you've all heard of numbers or numerals. What is this thing called integers? So let's just review, right? So if I were to ask you a series of numbers starting with 1, you would go 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. And how do you get to these numbers? By just adding 1 to the previous number. So when I start with 1 and I add 1 to it, I get 2 and then 3 and so on. And so it forms an entire series of numbers. Are there numbers less than 1? I'd let you think about it a little bit. Is there a number less than 1? Yes, of course there is a number less than 1, and that number is 0. Now, is 0 nothing? You must remember that when people say, oh, that's a 0, or he scored a 0, or so and so played in a cricket match and he just scored a duck, and we keep thinking, oh, that means that it has no value. But in reality, is 0 a number with no value? You know that's not true. What happens when we put a 0 at the end of 1? So it becomes 10. What if I put 2 zeros at the end of 1? It becomes 100. 3 zeros, it becomes 1,000. 4 zeros, and it's 10,000. 5 zeros, and it's 1,00,000. So you know that 0 cannot be a number with no value. It has a special place value depending on which place it occupies, right? And how many zeros are there in the place that occupies. So if I were to look at numbers and I start with 0 instead of starting with 1, we call them whole numbers. Whole numbers are the entire sequence of numbers starting with 0 and then adding consecutively 1 to each of the previous numbers. So you get 0, 1, 2, 3 and so on. Now, who created the 0 and where did it get created? And this is exciting because 0 was actually invented in India. So there's this whole story of how Brahmadatta, using dots and circles, created the idea of the numbers, especially the 0. And the Sanskrit word for 0 is shunya. But it was Aryabhatta, who's also credited with a lot of learnings in astronomy, who actually defined place value and the numerical value of 0 and looked at its true function. Let's come back to the number system. Now, you must have heard of several people in cold countries saying, you know, the temperature was freezing today, it was -5 centigrade, it was -10 centigrade. What is a -5 centigrade? What is a -10 centigrade? What is this minus? So look at these set of numbers. Are you seeing some numbers now with minus in front of them? So we said 0 is less than 1. We are now talking about numbers that are less than 0. So after 0, what is 1 minus 0? Minus 1. 0 minus 2 is minus 2. 0 minus 3 is minus 3. 0 minus 4 is minus 4. So you can still stretch the numbers less than 0. And now you see in front of me what we call a number line. With 0 at the center of this number line, all the numbers which are to the right are positive numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, or you can also call them +1, +2, +3, +4. And to the left of 0, you have all the numbers less than 0. Now, if you look at this carefully, you will see something interesting. The number closest to 0 is -1. Immediately to the left of that is -2. To the left of -2 will be -3. Now look at the number line again. So the further and further and further a number goes below 0, its numerical value after the minus sign is higher. So -10 is very far away from 0. -5 is less far. -1 is pretty close, and then it approaches 0. Similarly, on the right, it keeps increasing in value. This, children, is called the number system. Now, when we look at the entire set of numbers with both the minus numbers and the plus numbers with 0 in the center, we call them integers. The entire system is called the integer system. So, we learnt about 4 concepts. 1, numbers, which you know what they are. 2, whole numbers when we include 0. 3, natural numbers when we are starting from 1. And fourth, the entire system, which is both the negative numbers and the positive numbers, including 0 in the center, and this entire system is called the system of integers, right? 0 is like the pulsing heart of the system, and we are going to have a very lovely song for you on what integers are, which I want you to sing along. But before we get there, let's look at where these minus numbers could be useful. So when you sometimes get into a lift, do you see that other than saying 0, which is the ground floor, and 1, which is the first floor, it sometimes even says -1? What does that mean? It means the floor below the ground, the underground. It could be the basement. Sometimes you can even have 2 floors underground, right? Like in shopping malls when they have underground basement parking. So negative numbers do have a value, and they do denote something when you're talking about something below the surface. Just like you look at this weather thermometer, so 0 degrees, but you can also have temperatures which are below 0, what we call sub-zero temperatures, when it gets colder and colder and colder until it reaches something called the absolute 0. Look at this beautiful figure. Now let's move on to a song, children, about understanding this entire system called integers, and I want you to sing along.
Listen up to the integer song. Clap and tap and sing along. Listen up to the integer song. Clap and tap and sing along. They're only numbers, you know, on either side of 0. They're only numbers, you know, on either side of 0. Integer, what do we say? Integer, what do we say? Integer, what do we say? Integer. Let us draw a number line. Mark the 0 with no sign. Always whole, never apart. At the center, good at heart. 0 is an integer, never plus or minus. 0 is an integer, never plus or minus.
So today we learned these 5 concepts. We learned about the number line, which is the entire set of numbers centered on 0, both to the left, which are called negative numbers, and to the right, which are called positive numbers. The set of positive and negative numbers, including 0, is called integers. So we learned natural numbers, which start from the number 1, 2, 3, and so on. Whole numbers, which include the number 0, starting from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and integers, which include both the negative and the positive numbers, including the 0. In the next lesson, we will look at how we use integers in calculations.